Okay, welcome back. Still kind of refining the face and getting into the smaller details now, right? So really looking at some small forms, but always paying attention to, or always being aware of the possibility that big forms are going to have problems. And you'll see that this is a little bit funny. So it pops up there. Right, frontal bone, and I'll have to do more with the front of the head because hopefully some of you can look at this and say that it's not quite there. And so you'll see this refine the whole time, really trying to nail the angle of it and nail the transition side to side into the temporal line. Okay. Uh, Eyelids are very specific, and we have pretty good edge flow along these eye contours, right? So sometimes it's a standard brush to just pop out a standard brush with lazy mouse, which you can see here, to just roll along this with a nice smooth even stroke to pop this out, and then maybe another one to push it in. Um, and then getting the eye spherical, often I'll make a sphere in a separate subtool, and I'll use Z Project, and I will show you a little working little tools and technique video how to do that. Okay, making him a little bit squintier there. Just kind of pulling those, going down to level 1 with this masked. Right, I have a little mask here to keep all that in place, and then literally just a slide of these edges up will give him a little bit more of a closed eye, right? Because the bottom lid is kind of is a defining aspect of that kind of a squint. So you can see over here that I've got a scale factor that I've transposed this guy's this head down. So I have, you see, at some point under the hood in the last minute or so, I've gone in and done a little transpose at level 1 with a mask up through here, up through the neck, to just take him in a little bit. Because as I blocked in the hair, his head got too big for his body, right? So I've just scaled him down, and I haven't gone back to revisit my proportions, my actual measurements. But I think probably in all that pushing and pulling, I've exceeded what's kind of allowed. So I've just conformed it back. And actually, right now, I'm fairly happy with the proportions. So I'm going to leave the measurements behind and concentrate on likeness. Okay, and what I'm doing here is just kind of the crazy, put the light in different areas and shine from everywhere, just to see how defective my planes really are, and or hopefully they're not defective and they're pretty solid. But this kind of exercise reveals a lot about the modeling that you put in, right? Because we read if we're modeling only under one lighting condition, we're going to miss something, right? So do occasionally throw your light around. It can reveal things. Sometimes I flip my model upside down so that top of the head's down here and the chin's down here, and he's looking a bit like this. That's his hair up here. Ears, yeah, great. Yeah, I could draw better than that, but yikes. So I like to have things on a layer as well, so that you can see where you've come from, and we've gotten to a pretty good place relative to where we started, but I think there's a little bit more to go. He certainly has more character, right? And he's starting to look a little bit like Andrew. Look at this one right here, though. Look at this big move that we put in to kind of fix his frontal bone. And now, again, another crazy move. I'm actually going to give him a face transplant to the left, right? So if you look at the center line going down, this mesh line, it all starts to go crazy to the right. So if you follow this line down, you can see it start to wiggle over a little bit. So I'm just doing a little nudge to the left. And certainly that's not going to be something that everybody has to do, but just be aware that this kind of stuff can happen and you just have to deal with it in your stride. Stay on target, Scott. Don't get distracted. That knee was starting to bother me. I almost went down and started working on it. Then I thought, no, this is about the face, so we better just continue with the face. I'm really kind of I'm feeling the character now in the front of the zygomatic arch, right? I'm really starting to feel that it's turned down and kind of a downward facing plane, and the light coming from up here kind of gives evidence of that as well, right? So that's why lighting is very important. And that needs volume. And he also looks kind of sad when he's looking straight ahead, because this big fold goes up like this, covering his eye, right? So I'm just trying to get a little bit more of that aspect. Even though he has a big furrow here, he kind of has a strange combination of shapes on his lid, so pay attention to those. What's going to happen next? You saw me going through Lightbox. This is all quite wobbly here. Right, as I pulled it down, it's not matching perfectly the edge looping because I haven't tried to. And so it's kind of at higher resolution. I want to smooth this off, but without really deflating it. So I'm going to get the smooth directional brush, right, which allows you to smooth just in the direction that you're dragging the brush. And it's great for keeping things kind of smoothing this in and out, but not smoothing transversely. So it'll keep this contour, but we'll smooth along the line of the fold. I use it a lot for cloth, actually, because you don't want to lose the volume in the folds, but you want them to be nice and soft. Okay, this is back to clay tubes. Trying to match some of the little bit of bags under the eyes from the reference. In fact, it's mostly I mirrored the image and I'm using the same bags on both sides, but sculpted twice, slightly differently. They will be enough asymmetry to make them unique and not read as a carbon copy. Okay, here we go into profile assessment, right? And we're not perfect by a long shot, but we're going to try to get a little bit closer to what we need to do. And again, he's kind of pulling an expression in here, so I'm more or less neutralizing the expression in mine, making him a little more grumpy as opposed to smirk. But in fact, this is a great image because it's kind of at the right angle for our head in this pose, if you're using this pose. I popped his neck up a little bit. Just based on this, I will actually probably pop it down again later, at least a little ways, because it doesn't quite match. Okay, so I'm looking at the line of the forehead in the portrait. Angle of the neck at the back. The chin line above and below. And really just tweaking the verts and the nose It's big in mine, but it needs to be even bigger. So I'm pulling some of those forms out. And eventually I will uh, do even more on the frontal bone, but I have kind of a nice convexity working there. Okay, so you have to be careful when you're doing this to rotate around a little bit to make sure that you're not destroying all the adjacent forms when you're tweaking the profile, right? Tweak to the profile is going to work right along the center line, but if you're just pulling that out, it can destroy the modeling in related areas. So you have to kind of refine and iterate if you're working on the profile. Working on the profile, I noticed that his hairline was too high. He had a receding hairline. Now we're going to just try to sort that out, give it a little bit better line. Ears were too small, so I've just done a quick transpose mask on those to make them taller. You see how they are here. You know, not huge, but pretty big. So then a transpose and a scale there, like so. And it was a little bit too much, so I took it back. And then just kind of trying to match some of the big shapes. Again, ears, nobody cares about ears as far as a portrait goes. You just have to have them on the face. If somebody has very distinct ears, you might need to match them, but otherwise you can just get away with making ears and getting them broadly in the right place. If I step back a couple frames, you can see I did a little cheat test like that, and I do that certainly to help you if it helps you. I'm trying to do everything by eye, just because that's the purest way to do a portrait. But you know, if it helps get things in alignment for you, by all means. I don't want this to become an image plane modeling exercise, though. That's absolutely not the point. Because, you know, if you're a slave to reference, then you don't, and not understanding what you're sculpting, then when you don't have reference and you try to generate something creatively, then you'll be at a loss, right? So we're using reference to show us the forms to sculpt, but then we're not really tracing, right? So we're learning this as we go. So you see this area has been refined many times already, right? So really still even getting more volume in there, more of the kind of orbital corner, more of this, and more volume in this transitional area, kind of the bag over the eye on both sides. And I'm giving a faint elevation here of eyebrow, right? Eyebrow is a really difficult thing sculpturally, because we may put it in at the very last minute, just as a very finishing touch, just a little bit of rake brush or something to simulate hairs. But beyond that, an eyebrow has a little bit of a convexity that catches the light, right, in the skin, not just the actual hairs of the eyebrow. And so I'm putting a little bit of that in. And you can observe that for yourself in the reference. A lot of moving around, just looking and seeing how things are. And I'm still concerned about the forehead, the transitions in the planes. I'm looking at the nasal labial furrow now with an eye to refining it. And you can see I'm actually using standard brush with a big focal shift, so really tight tip, and lazy mouse to get this up and down. And then you've seen me hit replay last a couple times in the stroke menu. That's really just to get the line and the subtleties of the line to go the right way, right? It goes, that's horrible. I'm sorry about that cursor, but the gesture goes in and out. Okay, looking at very specifically the corner here. You know, look at all these different contours and all these changes in planes. You know, how they relate to this convex mass here. Right? And I've almost given him a little bit too much smirk, you know, so I'm going to have to neutralize this at a certain point coming forward and just pull this corner down a little bit. Because certainly that looks like a smile. And he has a little bit of that in some of the reference, but it's too much for what I'm trying to achieve. Have a really tight standard brush, and I'm just pushing in the edge loop right at the part of the lips, digging it in at the corners to give us the appearance that it's not, that there's kind of two independent lips touching in the middle and not just one solid mesh. Right, so really trying to give accent to that depth. A few strokes down here. I want you guys to pay careful attention to this area of the mouth, the lower lip, where it kind of flows up and down like that. All right, you get a little bit of a convexity building up in that area. And now I'm trying to take some of the flatness in the planes of the lip out. So I'm kind of arcing this stuff up. And I put a little bit of convexity back in here. Careful not to take it too far though, or it'll look kind of girlish. Little detail down there, the lower lip. Some big changes, pulling the ears out. This is what I'm talking about as far as crazy assessment goes. Sometimes just flipping your image upside down or sideways or lighting it from a different angle will give you a totally different perspective on the forms, right? Which will give you the ability to just read a little bit better with clearer eyes. So this is refining. You see I'm taking the temporal line back. This is obviously going to have influences on the line of the hair, but right now I'm just building it up a little bit, making it a little bit more solid. And when I do that, I'm like, well, better make some hair. So I'm just flirting with real hair right now and some small details. I'm not going to do this whole mask, but I want to just get some of these fringe areas with just a little bit for just for a test anyways. So you'll see me kind of do something there in a minute. Back to the eyes, a quick look at the eyes, some of the caries, the bags under there. Starting to look very closely at those. since everything else is starting to get in place, so starting to get deeper and deeper into the details. But again, details really aren't important if everything else is not in the right place. So details only become icing on the cake, really. Certainly, you miss the icing if you don't have it, but if you don't have any cake, you don't really care if you've got a big plate full of icing. Okay, to get a little bit deeper brush, you can see in kind of big rounder, a little bit rounder tubes, I'm going standard brush with alpha. I think this is alpha 35 or something. Let me just rewind and see if I can find it. You guys can find it. It looks like that. It's one of the alphas that come built in. Okay, we'll say that much. And with a kind of a short, lazy mouse, and the idea is just to get curves in and build those curves up. Again, deeper lesson on this stuff forthcoming. But it's all about getting small curve forms to ride on top of big kind of curve forms and volumes. Right, so that's what you see I'm doing. I'm going to start saying less because a lot of this stuff is just small refinements. So you guys can just watch this as I go through. It's a hard area to get this area that fills in the orbit, right? This is kind of the inner corner of the orbit. It's overhung. You have the overhang of the brow, and you have the termination of this top skin cover fold here coming in. So just look at how this finishes. Nice round convexity, and it tucks. It actually ends up going all the way down to here in a strange kind of softening, right? So really convex and overhanging here, parts away from the upper lid here, right at this point, and then starts to shallow out. Then when it gets the orbital wall, it starts to descend and get even shallower and shallower, and then it just kind of tucks in right at the area here where this actually comes together and attaches into the orbit. Small things that are hard to appreciate, I know. Portraiture is a massive amount of small forms and large forms, and you guys are probably going through information overload, but I want you guys to know what goes into the final look. So I'm showing you this time lapse unedited. Pretty much, this is every stroke that I've made to make this guy's face. Okay, and this is getting up to the end of part 2, and I'm going to stop this video here, and we'll be back for just the very last bit where I finish off a few more details. Okay, I'll see you again in a few minutes.